How did the museum end up in St. Petersburg, Florida?
There's no reason for it to be here.
Dalí
was never here. He had no family here. The Morses had never been here. They have no family here. It feels like Dalí is a creation. He was able to maintain that facade decades and decades and decades, Dalí has a phrase in his autobiography. He says that facts are like jewels. It's the false ones that shine the most brightly. And what Dalí wanted was to constantly undermine your sureness of reality. He wanted to systematize the irrational. Well, we have him saying, I don't take LSD, I am LSD, I'm the drug. Take Dalí.
Right. Hello, you beautiful people. Welcome back to Talkin St. Pete. I'm your host, Ryan Bogden. Talkin St. Pete is everything St. Petersburg, Florida. Talking to amazing business owners, artists, city officials, and today probably going to be one of my favorite episodes because my favorite artist happens to be Salvador Dalí. And for those of you that don't know, the Dalí Museum is here in St. Petersburg. And I have Peter Tush, who is here. He is a curator and senior interpreter for the museum. Peter, I'm ecstatic to have you here on the show. What an honor and privilege. And, I think this is episode 89, and to make it this far. And, I've had a Dalí print poster hanging in my home since I lived in Philadelphia, and it's traveled with me all the way to Florida. So this is really cool.
Well, thank you for the invitation.
Yes.
Happy to be here.
Yes.
See what I can, what light I can shed on this topic.
Well, I think first, for those few that don't maybe know what a curator or a senior interpreter does for a museum, let's start there.
Yeah, so I've been at the museum for a couple decades. Over that time, I've grown and been in different areas. I was in charge of education for a while. More recently, I became one of our curators, and my charge is basically what the story is that we share with our audience, whether it's in the visiting exhibition or the permanent collection. So for most of the time I've been here, had the privilege of training our guides, our docents, and basically helping them to nuance the stories about our collection. And then when we have traveling exhibitions, it's just trying to help find the right story for each key piece that's part of that show. Yeah,
a lot there. And so, how long have you been at the museum?
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah.
I'll put it that way.
Yeah,
since
fair enough.
The 90s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And when just get all these basic questions out of the way.
Yeah.
When did the museum first open?
82.
Okay.
1982.
82. And this was someone's private collection, if I'm not mistaken.
It was. Yeah, it was a couple from Cleveland, Ohio. They spent 35 years starting to collect work simply because they loved it, then very quickly meeting the artist, then traveling with the artist, then keeping journals about the artist, then writing books. And so, over that 35 years, they came to really become the primary patrons of Salvador Dalí. And they were definitely part of his world.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to collect as much as they had, it's quite impressive.
Yeah.
And so now for the two people listening that don't know, who is Salvador Dalí?
So Salvador Dalí is a Spaniard. He's from the Catalan region, best known as perhaps the most memorable of the surrealist artists from the mid-1900s. He was with the movement, surrealism, for about 10 years, 1929 and 1939. But for the general public, I think he sort of is the embodiment of what people think about with surrealism.
Yeah, and I noticed, I wish, maybe I can pull it up quick, because I don't think it's in your deck, his most famous piece.
Right. It's in the Museum of Modern Art. It's called The Persistence of Memory.
Yes.
With the melting watches.
The melting watches. As we're talking, Peter,
Yes.
I'm just going to pull up here.
Yeah.
Let's see. Hopefully nothing crazy pops up when I open my Google. Oh, nope, Zillow as appropriate. So, Dalí, what would
melting clock. Melting
that'll
watch.
come up, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's everywhere. There's one. There you go. Got it right there.
Oh, through Etsy, but everyone gets the point here. This is the most famous
It is.
work of art for Dalí. What many people know, but if you like this piece, I've fallen in love with many others.
Yeah, we have an extraordinary collection, but the piece actually, if it's easy to just go right back to, it was done 1931, so he had just joined the movement, and even though the movement had probably over its time 80, 90, 100 potential people, that were associated with surrealism. It's probably the number one icon that, for the entire movement.
So what do you think it was about this piece in particular that
Well,
really?
I think it captures anxiety really well. For Dalí, he was deeply influenced by Freud and the idea of dreams. He wanted to paint hand-painted dream photographs. So he liked the idea of something that seems photographic and yet it just happens to be painted by hand. But the weird shape that looks a little bit gelatinous, that's a self-portrait. So it's like a skull it's like a head where the skull has been removed. So it's become very soft, gelatinous, almost like an embryo.
Okay. I never would have thought that. I always wondered what that was.
Yeah, so that's a self-portrait. And then he has this kind of wasteland sort of environment, and then there's the melting watches. And I think the big thing is, in order for society to function, you need to be able to use a calendar, you need to be able to use a clock, you need to be able to organize with others. And if a clock is suddenly melting and not working properly, it's like in dreams, time's irrelevant. And I think that's what this painting really gets at.
Yes, a little lucid. I right away, just because we're already talking about this, Dalí put a lot of ants in a lot of his paintings.
Yeah. He had a few. There's one key story he tells from his childhood about seeing, I guess, a hedgehog that had died and was swarming with ants. And it left such a visceral impression on him. He used it whenever he wanted to use it as a symbol of terror, a symbol of horror. And so there's a lot of times where his paintings have objects that are being eaten away. Here, ironically, it's a watch. A watch is being eaten away by ants.
Oh man, it's so good. Yeah. He is so good. So just to zoom back out a little bit, so now that the audience knows who Dalí is, and he is my favorite. How did the museum end up in St. Petersburg, Florida?
Yeah, it's a really good question. There's no reason for it to be here.
Dalí
was never here. He had no family here. The Morses had never been here. They have no family here. It was simply that in the mid-1970s, they had just opened their own museum in Cleveland, in Beechwood, Ohio. And the IRS changed its tax law. So it was still a private museum, a private collection. And when the IRS changed its tax law, it meant that the value that they would have to pay for inheritance tax was based on the accrued value, not the purchase price value. It was a problem for many collectors, nationally. And they realized they couldn't give it to their son. So they started to try to find a place to gift it to. And the big thing about the 1970s is Dalí was a difficult personality. He did not make a lot of friends in the art world. He was pretty much like a sore spot. Deliberately. I think he enjoyed being the fly in the ointment. But it meant that places like the Denver Museum of Art, or more importantly, the Cleveland Museum of Art, didn't want the responsibility of having a whole Dalí museum. And for the Morses, that was the key. They wanted to keep it intact. So they kind of negotiated with a number of places, but nothing was really coming together. And so there was an article in the Wall Street Journal. It said, "Art world dilly-dallies over Dalí's." And there was a local, this is just an insane story, but there was a local lawyer just starting out, an attorney named James Martin. He's sitting there, just started his business, just sitting out on his porch reading that article. And he remembered that at the pier, there was an empty floor. And he thought, what a great place for a Dalí collection. He, like you, had grown up in college having Dalí posters and thought, why not? The crazy thing is he told this to a couple people that were, in the city council at that time, and they said, why not too? And so long story short, they tried to contact the Morses. The Morses were traveling, so they called them in the airport in Miami, had this brief conversation where Reynolds Morse was intrigued. It's like, that sounds interesting. So eventually the Morses came to visit, and they flew up there. And very quickly, it kind of came together. The Reynolds Morse, when he saw the space that was being discussed, was like, it's in the middle of the water. There's no way. But the city had just acquired some land over on 3rd Street, which now it was our original building in 1982, now part of USF. And just one thing led to another. And we had George Firestone, the Secretary of State then, who put together very quickly a really amazing way to keep this collection here in St. Pete.
Yeah. It's remarkable. So it didn't start out in the building that it's in now.
Right. We moved because of hurricanes. We were in a building that it became really clear after Andrew hit Miami how vulnerable the building would be. So
and the collection.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when is the building that we're currently in? And it's such a unique design.
Yeah.
When did the collection move there?
it was 2011.
Okay, so kind of recent.
Well, yeah, about 14 years. It was January 11th, 2011. We cut the ribbon at 11:11 a.m.
So you've been there since before then. That's really cool, Peter.
Yeah.
And it's really unique. And to the point of the hurricanes, the collection's not on the bottom floor.
It's not on the bottom floor, and the building it's a fortress. It's a bunker. It's like what is it? I just was reading this number. It's 18 inches of concrete poured over amazing amounts of rebar. It'll stand a Category 5 easily, the building itself. So the collection's very intact.
We're very happy about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there? So I have my whole thing of questions, but I know you have this slideshow here. Anything that we should jump to, or
no? Just whenever. There's a few things Sarah can talk to, but if you want to answer, go through some of the questions you have.
Well, let's go through that, and then because it will, I'll navigate as they come up. Yeah.
Okay.
So obviously, picture of the Dalí Museum here and the way it showed up in.
Yeah, so I think probably most people in St. Petersburg are familiar with our building. It's beautiful. And it was Jan Weymouth from HOK. He was our architect. He worked with our director and a team of people to more or less bring it together. And you can see that the building, it is that, just poured concrete, no ornamentation whatsoever. But they discovered this particular glass that was revolutionary. So it's basically we have a geodesic structure. But until 2010, 2011, they had always been perfectly, what's the right word? Symmetrical, in order to support themselves. This was a company out of Italy called Novum Glass, and they created this thing where you could actually use a computer to figure out the stress points, and it allowed us to break the building open, bringing light to all the public areas that are not where the artwork isn't, and created this thing called the Enigma, which looks very much like Dalí's paintings. It's like a bubble is suddenly coming out of the building.
Yes. Just because maybe you were a part of this and that, how many renditions did this building go through before they landed on this design? Because I can imagine that was probably very difficult to pick one.
Yeah, and the big thing to know is that Dalí's museum in Spain, because he has a museum there that opened in '74, has a geodesic dome in the middle of it, and that's where he's buried. He's buried under the geodesic structure in his own museum.
And is it Figueres? How do you say?
Figueres.
Figueres, Spain.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And so Eleanor Morse, who was still alive when we were designing this, for her, it's like the geodesic structure was everything. We had to pay tribute to Dalí's museum. And I can say that until we discovered this non-symmetrical version, they were all looking a little bit underwhelming. It just didn't have a kind of organic feel to it. And suddenly they discovered this probably 2 weeks before we had to have the final decision
down
made.
to the wire.
Yeah, and it changed everything. So it really put us on the map. It's it's a building that's been recognized internationally as one of the great museum designs, and it feels very appropriate for the artists we have.
Yeah, and let's to zoom out of Dalí for a minute of what this collection being here has done for the city and the art movement of St. Petersburg. I think that's important to highlight.
Yeah, so it's been here since '82, so it really helped the city to mature. I mean, there are amazing organizations and institutions through St. Pete. I think us being here helped as an anchor to make people recognize St. Petersburg is, has a lot to offer culturally. And so, now we have the Imagine Museum, we have the James Museum, we have the Museum of Arts and Crafts. There are just so many new things that the Museum of Fine Arts and the Dalí Museum became anchors for the community and really did help to bring a higher profile.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think I wonder what St. Petersburg would look like today if Dalí Museum was not here,
Yeah, that's a really good point. And as a matter of fact, one thing just to mention, we have a show right now called Outside In. It's 13 muralists who've been involved in Shine. For 10 years, we've had this mural program in St. Petersburg. And it's just so wonderful to have invited them and to have them respond to the museum and our collection and Dalí and just see the array of stories they want to tell, and also hear from them personally, a number of them having really personal experiences of deciding they wanted to be an artist after visiting the museum when they were kids. So yeah, I mean, it's legacy.
Yeah, 100%. It's really cool, and I think that's what Dalí would have wanted right from it. Okay, so the building's been here since 2011.
Yep.
We talked about
This is the couple, just Reynolds and Eleanor Morse. They had married in 1942, and so on their anniversary, their first-year anniversary, they decided to take the plunge. They bought their first painting, Daddy Longlegs of the Evening Hope, and 1 month later, they met the artist and his wife in person in New York.
And so what was that relationship like between them? Because, I mean, to collect as many pieces as they had, Dalí had to have liked them.
He did. He liked the fact that they were younger than him, which meant that they were younger collectors than the people they had cultivated in Europe. They met during World War II, so the Morses were a younger couple here in America when Dalí was trying to get a footing here, and they really became very receptive. Like they bought this not one painting, they bought several paintings and a number of drawings within about 2 months.
Wow.
And so I think the Dalís knew that this was a very hungry young couple that
So I wonder how much do you think that Dalí created any work specifically for them, or like how did, and that goes into the creative aspect of you interpreting his work, and where did he get his inspiration from?
He got his inspiration from lots of different sources, but it was always focused on dreams. He had a very complex set of symbols and ideas that came from reading Freud, from analyzing things in his world, from responding to previous art forms. The Morses just quickly got in tune with those ideas. And so they would go to openings and they would find works to select. So there was never a work that they commissioned from Dalí, and the Dalís, I don't think, ever painted something that they felt this was going to be for the Morses.
Even more authentic to just Dalí doing his creative magic.
Yeah. And then at some point, very early, late 50s, early 60s, Eleanor Morse started to translate French books about him into English. And so they really got involved in the whole process of interpreting.
And what was their background? I mean,
he was from a Denver family that was in the silver mines. They had silver mining.
Okay.
Yeah, so like his granddad was on the board of the Denver Museum of Natural History. Her parents were part of Reese Chemical in Cleveland. So they were kind of wealthy families, but they were really given to culture. She studied opera. He had studied art as well as business, went to Harvard Business School. And they both were starting off, they had founded this company called Injection Molding Supplies, plastic moldings.
Oh.
Equipment.
They were a little early.
They were there right at the beginning.
Yeah.
So really important opportunity for a young couple to start to be able to, collect art.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, we thank them, right? Because we wouldn't have the Dalí Museum without them here in St. Petersburg.
That is for sure.
So we're going back in time here. This is some of Dalí's early work.
Yeah, I just wanted to show this because the Morse collection was definitely a collection put together by a couple for their house to live with. It was never thought of as a museum until 1965, so a good 20 years before they thought about that. And so they acquired pieces like this that look nothing at all like Dalí. This is Dalí under the spell of Picasso and Cézanne and early modernists.
I just want how you said under the spell of Picasso. Is that what? Tell me more about that.
Yeah, for Dalí, when he was young, Picasso was the most important artist in the world. And he knew him, he met him in the 30s. Picasso was associated with surrealism, so they saw each other frequently in the early 30s. And then after Dalí came to America in 34, which supposedly Picasso financially helped, something happened. And they became I can't even say they became rivals because Dalí, his entire life, continued to interact with Picasso, but more as an adversary, but would still send him postcards every year. For Picasso, Dalí, especially after the Spanish Civil War, became a non-entity. Picasso left Spain, said he would never set foot in Spain as long as Franco was in power. Dalí remained associated with Spain and lived there throughout his life in alliance with Franco. He knew that he couldn't be there without being in alliance with Franco. And so, as a result, Picasso, Dalí was a persona non grata to Picasso. But there were 23 years difference. Picasso was quite a bit older. And I would say everything that Dalí did before he became a surrealist, there is a really important influence of Picasso more than anybody else.
You can see it.
Yeah.
You can see in his work. I mean, I just had to bring it because I thought that was fascinating the way you say "under the spell" of Picasso, of how much that influenced his work.
There was no other artist that mattered as much as Picasso. And then when he met him in 1926, he was only 22 years old. Picasso just lived up to every expectation he had.
There's some really early work of Dalí in the museum, and I can't remember the exact year, but Dalí was very young, like 12
13,
or
13 years old.
Yeah.
The very earliest painting we have, he was 13, and painting in the Impressionist style. There was neighbors that one of the members of that family was a post-impressionist who was very close with Picasso. And so Dalí saw these works that were in that style and more or less trained himself how to paint like that.
It's really unique.
So we have that, and then we have, one of the big parts of Dalí's world is the fact that his own autobiography is woven into every aspect of his art, but it's woven in a way that Dalí has a phrase in his autobiography. He says that facts are like jewels; it's the false ones that shine the most brightly, and so he was very comfortable with distorting facts. And so that brings us to this painting. This was done right when he joined surrealism, and it's called The Average Bureaucrat, but Dalí had a terrible relationship with his father. His father was an overbearing, demanding, short-tempered, bull of a person, and Dalí was a very timid, highly excitable, sort of, out-of-control personality. They constantly clashed, but then at a certain point when Dalí met the woman who became his wife, Gala, his father just went out of his mind and was so angry because she was married. She was 10 years older than Dalí. He thought she was a pusher, dealing drugs. That's the only way they could have money. And suddenly having Dalí not dependent on him and his money
made him angry.
Yeah. And so for about 5 years, they didn't speak to one another. And this was painted right at the beginning of that. So Dalí's father was a notary, a bureaucrat. He paints him as a man who seems to have forgotten that there's somebody in the room with him. He's not dressed in any kind of dignified way. He's fallen asleep. He's lost his ears.
Yeah, and there's almost like like shells of nothing.
Exactly. There's no brain matter.
Yeah,
just shells. And there's a little figure you can see just the middle left. That's an image of Dalí and his father when they were young, when he was young. A kind of Paradise Lost or something that. So a lot of Dalí's family stories are woven into his work, but amplified.
So you said when he joined surrealism. What does that mean?
Yeah. So following World War I in France, a lot of artists started to gather as part of what was called Dada. And it was definitely a group of artists who were creating critical, explosive, subversive work that wasn't about beauty, but rather about the ugliness they saw around them. At a certain breaking point between 1922 and 24, some of those individuals, some of the artists decided to go off and do something more creative, I guess. Or they decided to take this energy and turn it outward in a more positive way, and that became surrealism. So there was a number of writers, including a gentleman named André Breton. He was like the theorist of the group, and they looked to Freud and the unconscious and dreams as the source of inspiration. They felt World War I happened because man had shut off any aspect of the irrational and just relied on rationality to the point where stupid things were happening, horrible things resulted. And
so they went, the world went so rational, we're going to go into the complete irrational. And so that's why in this art you see things that just don't make sense because they don't need to.
Exactly.
So how would you describe surrealism?
Well, surrealism did have the ultimate goal of bringing those two worlds together. But I think that they really found the irrational fascinating. So it first was a group of writers, and then it expanded in the mid-20s to become a group of artists and writers, all exploring the irrational, the dream state, the synchronous, just unexpected turns of the mind or twists of the tongue, and trying to find that as grist for their mill for creating objects. And so by the 1930s, suddenly there were artists like Dalí who, he's 10 years younger than all of them, never saw war. Suddenly there's a place for them in this movement. So the second trip Dalí made to Paris in his life, he did some exciting things that led him to be invited to become one of the group.
Okay, so
So
that's
it
when you
was-
say when he joined.
Yeah,
right?
so it was
a
a
movement.
It was a movement, and by that point there was probably 20 or 30 people that were already part of it, and
Wow.
there was kind of a schism in the middle of it. So in 1930, Dalí arrives, and there's people that are purged from the movement. There's people that are suddenly rising to the ranks, so to speak, and Dalí comes at the right moment, and he's kind of an explosive personality. He's just filled with ideas, and suddenly has this international audience that's responding.
It's really it's funny how the war and in that moment of what like all that chaos shook out right
Yeah.
of this
Yeah.
moment right because so
Absolutely.
you could say if the war didn't happen that this movement wouldn't have happened and we wouldn't have achieved this great art right
Everything would be obviously
yeah
very
we
different.
told but it's just like
Yeah.
it goes into that paradigm of like you can't have when there's darkness there's light when there's light there's darkness and you have to have out of both right
Absolutely, yeah.
so yeah fascinating.
And then, Dalí became just a genius with juxtapositions that are memorable. He found ways to show you something you've never seen before, and suddenly it's like, wow.
Right, the lobster telephone.
Yeah, it's aggressive, it's haunting, it's like a image from a nightmare, but it also looks very functional, like something could be in your domestic, environment.
Absolutely.
And then Dalí was a real master at creating double images. So this is one where if you go to just the next slide, you'll see the double image, which is, this is the bust of Voltaire that's in France at the Louvre. And then on the right, you can see where, and if we go back to the original, there's a woman there's a slave market going on in the background.
Oh, yeah.
And that opening in the back wall, and those two Dutch merchants standing there, they form the eyes and the nose and the cheek and lips of the philosopher Voltaire.
Yeah, for those that are just listening, I would highly recommend you go find us on YouTube right now because we have up on the screen right here some of Dalí's work, and it's quite impressive to see how he made pictures inside of pictures using pieces. I don't know how would you describe that, Peter?
Well, you look at it and you see a group of figures standing in the background, and suddenly you realize you see a face, and the world doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
It's not supposed to work like that. That's Alice in Wonderland time. And what Dalí wanted was to constantly undermine your sureness of reality. He wanted to systematize the irrational, to make it constant. And so he would notice things like this. He would see in the bust something else, and he would paint that and then so that we saw it.
It's so cool.
And this one is pretty remarkable. This is a painting that probably the last painting I think acquired for the collection. The Morses were about to open their museum in 1971. They bought this in 1970. It was still in Dalí's studio. He was just finishing it. And it's called the hallucinogenic Toreador. So it's a bullfighter that emerges out of Venus de Milo. Mm-hmm. And in the next slide, you'll see the inspiration, which is... I don't have it. Okay, I'm sorry about that. Dalí was buying art supplies, and he bought a box of pencils with the Venus de Milo on the cover, and he started looking at it, and he saw a face. And so he spends the next 16 months elaborating it, working it, until finally what you see here in this image, that green shadow on the middle Venus becomes a tie of a bullfighter shirt. And then you can see the white part on either side is the collar of his shirt. And you go up into the Venus's body.
I see it.
Yeah. You go into her body, and you can see the shadow across her abdomen and belly, and that becomes the chin and lips. The nose is her breast. The face is the eye of the bullfighter. And so he takes something you've seen so many times.
I've seen this. I've been to the museum, I think, 4 times, and I've looked at it, and I've never seen that.
It's just amazing, and it's like he saw things like that all the time, but this was the most sustained opportunity he had to develop it. The painting's 12 feet tall. It's an
massive.
enormous experience.
It's massive.
Yeah, it's like a mural. And it's just filled with references to all points in his career. So when the Morses were opening their museum, they knew this had to be like the end point to just show everything that they had acquired.
I want to come back to this because I want to talk about when the atomic bomb went off because you can feel that in this thing. But I want to show you what my favorite flight of a bee.
Yes.
This is the one that I have. Just the poster of.
Uh-huh.
And wow, this one I don't know why.
Yeah.
Has become one of my favorites.
It's just an incredible piece. It's the Thyssen-Bornemisza Museum, but it's out there.
It is so out there.
Yeah.
One, I'm finding out more and more about how good pomegranates are for your health.
Yeah.
No, they genuinely are.
Absolutely.
And so, they're the fruit of the gods. And so him and putting this in there, I don't know where the fish comes from, but then the tigers and it's just so random.
Yep.
And the bee and the pomegranate flight part of to what the title is called is so small.
Yeah.
This painting is
So
just,
I think this is about how something in your real world affects your dreams. And so this is Dali's wife in a state of slumber, but also she's already dreaming. Mm-hmm. She's hearing the bee flying around the pomegranate, and the moment where she's stung leads to this explosion of the pomegranate exploding the fish, which explodes the lions into the gun that feels like it's about to kill her. But it's just like the sequence, like a chain of events.
Yeah.
You know?
He did a great job. So where does his inspiration come from? Because in a lot of his paintings here, the elephant has extremely long legs, and that shows up in a lot of his work.
It does. It's often referred to as a cosmic space elephant.
Okay.
And the idea is something so heavy and enormous as an elephant, what happens if it has like the legs of a mosquito? You know, really long, just distended, kind of spindly, spidery legs. It's irrational, and it absolutely, takes you there. But it was also, I'm sure, the inspiration for the Star Wars figures. When you see those movers,
right? That's a
Yeah.
great point. Never thought about that. That is exactly what that looks like.
It is. It's crazy. But yeah. So it's that irrational element of a mosquito combined with an elephant, and it suddenly creates something again.
I don't know why.
Memorable.
Yes, that one.
That is a great painting, though.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites. So. Dalí seemed to have some sense of connectivity throughout the world, that he could feel the emotions that was happening around the world. I mean, his sensitivity to that shows through his painting, and I think that's what makes him unique. You can really feel it at the time of when the atomic bomb was set off.
Yeah.
And you can feel that energy that came to his work. Could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so all the way through the 30s, he is a surrealist. He's deeply into Freudian psychology. He's trying to explore dreams. And then the war happens. He's forced to go into exile here in the United States. And he's here for 8 years. And right in the middle of that period, we dropped the bombs, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And it really, obviously, it changed the world. Everybody changes that moment in time. And initially, the paintings that come after that are very dark, and they're trying to grapple with this idea of the Bikini Atoll and the damage that's been done by the uranium. And he's trying to find his footing. And then, ironically, or just weirdly, by the end of the 1940s, Dalí has Actually, step back. Dalí has an interpreter who is translating his books that he's writing in the 1940s. His autobiography, there's a book called 50 Secrets. This translator is named Hakan Chevalier. And if you've seen the movie Oppenheimer, he's his very close friend. He was at San Diego University, and it seems that he was able to share with Dalí some of the science behind the bomb. And that just led Dalí's mind to a very different point. And so by 1950, Dalí reinvents himself as what he calls a nuclear mystical painter. And so he's responding to not the bomb, but the science behind the bomb, the subatomic universe.
Yes.
And so all those paintings start to have things floating, and there's lots of space around them, and there's things atomizing and moving into smaller particles. And he's really trying to find a visual language to explain the most brilliant of all surreal experiences is not in dreams, but rather it's in the subatomic universe. Yeah, and so he's just becomes this like mystical artist, who's trying to explore.
But he
that.
was so on, Peter. So we don't know each other, but and my team knows. In my free time, for some odd reason, I explore the world of quantum.
Okay.
And so when
you can appreciate this,
and that was I appreciated Dalí and seen that before. Like this is like a season of life that I'm rolling into. Because I'm just fascinated of how does the universe work. And so when you see Dalí's work and the new knowledge that I have of it, it's like, to your point, he had to be so close to understand how these technologies were working and how the universe is made of all these particles.
As a matter of fact, by probably 1955, 1956, he says his new father is no longer Freud, it's Heisenberg. And we have a painting in our collection where he's trying to do a visual metaphor of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. So it's like, yeah, he was very much trying to find a language visually to share that sense that you have.
Yeah. Oh,
Just
it's
the
like
world
kind of
is so
gave me
different.
goosebumps a little bit thinking about it, because the way you just described that it was brilliantly done. Like you can tell your knowledge on this is so vast and it's deep ingrained inside of you. And I feel like, if Dalí was alive, you guys would have been homies.
I don't know about that. He was a difficult personality, but he was
for
very
sure.
funny.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
His personality, his eccentricness. So what do you like? Who was Dalí as a person, as you've known it and came to interpret?
Yeah, so that's a really fundamental question, and that's the one that biographers have spent their whole lives trying to figure out. It feels like Dalí is a creation. Certainly we know a couple things. We know that Dalí was very timid, and yet he had this extraordinary imagination. He found that he was very secure performing in front of an audience, not being himself, but being bigger than himself.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like what he was able to do pretty early on was start developing a mask, sort of a facade to hide behind, or to not be part of the public. So the public would only see the facade. But the amazing thing about Dalí is that he was able to maintain that facade decades and decades and decades. I think there is a Dalí somewhere in there that's more simple, more humble, more a young boy from growing up in a little rural Catalan community. But he just never had the ability to stop being, the celebrity Dalí, the bigger than life kind of character.
And his wife, I mean, he brings her in, Gala, right?
Yes.
Into so much of his work, and I know through watching the movie and the 360 Sphere of how much of an impact that she had on him. Do you think she kept him grounded?
Yeah. Well, I won't say grounded. She kept him working. She knew Dalí was the cash cow. Dalí could not have existed without her.
Got it.
She was his muse. She was also his wife. She was also a business manager. She was the one who set up all the deals. She also knew how to inspire him and how to keep him focused. Because I think without her, he would just spiral out, burn out.
Yeah. You can see that it's an intense amount of focus to do,
all of these.
Hallucinogenic toward, right? Like that's this focus that he had to put into this is incredible.
Yeah, it's a 16-month project, and he just keeps working on it. But she keeps him grounded enough so that he can work and not worry about, where the meal's coming from. What does he have to do tomorrow? Where does he have to go? Who does he have to meet?
Just kept him painting.
Yeah.
Do you think? Well, I got so many questions around that. Thinking about his inspiration and his creativity, you mentioned exploring dreams many, many times.
Yeah.
Do you think there was any interactive with any other substances that helped him be creative?
Yeah, so that's a real fundamental question. And I could share with you the simple answer that I give, which is that Dalí was a very hypersensitive individual, and he was kind of just afraid of many things. I think the simple answer is that he probably was terrified of exploring anything with any kind of psychotropic experience or any drugs. We know that he, as a student, went on benders with his friends, and then he kind of stopped. And he stopped drinking. He would have parties where he would have alcohol available. He wouldn't partake. And I think that, as you move forward, I think Dalí's imagination is so vivid and so hyperactive that I think he was terrified of overstimulating it or giving it other directions. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that's really important about Dalí, he never wanted to be unguarded. And so whenever he was with people, he would get only so relaxed, but there was always a performance going on. Under drugs, you lose the ability to be as guarded. Mm-hmm. You might become paranoid, but you don't become savvy.
I just wonder if his own in the privacy of his own home, if he ever explored, because of you hear of being a psychonaut, right? Exploration of the mind and what that would do for
Well, I
him.
can share a couple things. There's a book by a gentleman, Mark Lozano, I think is his name. He was one of the kind of Dalí groupies, but he was on the inner circle and he was a confidant. According to him, he's one of the only people that Dalí ever got high with. And it was only on a couple occasions. Again, it's hearsay. Maybe
Right,
it
yeah,
did,
so
maybe it didn't.
we're not sure.
But we also know that Dalí was going to go on a week-long trip with, not King Casey, but, oh, my God. The father of LSD, or at least not Stanley, that's not Cowsley, but Harvard professor.
Yeah. I can't remember.
I'm seeing his face and I'm drawing a blank with his name. Timothy Leary. Timothy
It
Leary.
just came to you, right?
Yeah. So they actually planned on a voyage of some sort, like a week-long destination adventure. And then Dalí backed out.
He didn't go. Yeah.
And it's like, that to me in a nutshell is kind of how I think of Dalí with drugs. He probably wanted to experience it.
Yeah.
but
Looked
he's
at
probably
it, but with that eye that he would give, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like from every indication
But we don't have anything of documentation or him saying that he ever.
Well, we have him saying, "I don't take LSD. I am LSD. I'm the drug. Take Dalí."
Right. Yeah.
So he found ways of capitalizing on something that supposedly he's not a part of.
Yeah. And I get the dream thing and like conscious, subconscious of what he's looking at, and I thought what I don't know how much involvement you had with the video that plays in the
dome.
In the dome.
Yeah.
But I love how it was said, that we look at his paintings as static, but they were never static in his mind.
Right.
And bringing them to life, even just a little bit in the dome of the video, you can really start to see of like how fluid these paintings were in his mind, before he had to paint them still, right? Because he just didn't have technology or any other way to express it at the time. And that was a moment for me, but sitting there, it kind of gave me goosebumps because it's like, oh, these things are alive.
Yeah.
There's more to than the static.
One thing you've got to do, 1945 to 46, Dalí worked at Disney Studios. Walt Disney met him, invited him to make a short that would be part of like another Fantasia. Never came to fruition. They never finished it, but Dalí worked for many, many months and developed a huge storyboard of his ideas. And then in 2003, Roy Disney oversaw gave the green light to it, and it was done under Baker Bloodsworth over in France, but they created the 7-minute video that Dalí had intended to make. You can find it on YouTube.
What's it called?
It's called Destino.
Destino.
Okay. And all you have to do is go to YouTube, just type in Dalí Disney, and it'll come up. But what you're saying, seeing Dalí in a kind of fluid way with organic transformations, that was what he lived for. Yeah. And so having that opportunity, he was extremely excited. They talk about, talking about what was Dalí like. During the time he worked for Disney, he clocked in at 9 in the morning. He clocked out at 5 in the afternoon. He ate at the commissary with the other Disney engineers. He spent time in the library, just like a normal person would be at a business.
Yeah.
So he was very serious about making it. And sadly, I think he had too many ideas for what Disney was looking for.
Right, probably. He probably spun out with the new creative medium, right, to do it. Yeah.
But when you see the video, even though there's a lot of digital that's been done, it looks genuinely like what Dalí had intended, and that's what's just so fascinating.
Absolutely. Knowing that his work and this extreme focus, do you think that was Dalí extremely intelligent or a madman?
Oh, I think definitely intelligent, highly driven to learn. I think he verged on madness for sure at key moments in his life. Also, probably existential despair. I think there were times where there was probably moments of self-loathing, it seems, where he just could not quite come to terms with what was happening around him. And then he gets back on track and, continues. But he could not have accomplished all he did without allowing his imagination kind of free rein to keep consuming more and more ideas. So I think he always liked to be the impresario for visitors at his house, or whenever he would meet someone, he would like to astound them with his, knowledge of the esoteric.
Yeah, I think I don't even know how you distinguish the two, but I thought it would be a good question, just because it's like that mind is so different than most. I would say, right?
Well, there's one really important story that also to me really helps. I think Van Gogh he rarely talks about, but there's a couple key moments in his art where he seems to reference Van Gogh. And one in particular is the lobster phone, which we've talked about it a number of times at the museum, where Van Gogh was a mad artist in the 19th century, associated with that because, of course, he cut off part of his ear, to prove his love. Dalí wanted to be the mad artist of the 20th century. He said the only difference between myself and a madman is I'm not mad. And, it seems like the lobster telephone is sort of a creation, an homage to Van Gogh. It would help you to lob off your ear very easily if it was a live lobster.
Oh, that's pretty good. All these subtleties in the work that you just would miss if you're not paying attention to.
And even Dalí was named after a brother who died before he was born, named Salvador Dalí.
Yes, I didn't know that.
Vincent van Gogh was named after a dead brother who he was named after.
Wow.
So Dalí is certainly aware of that parallel between the two of them. But I think Dalí, in some ways, envied the kind of the way that Vincent was the mad artist of the 19th century.
So kind of a lot of inspiration from his previous mentors, even from a distance, right? Even if you never met them.
Exactly.
How does one, what's your world look like now on a day-to-day, Peter? I mean, we've been so focused on that, but you've consumed all this knowledge over the last 25 years or so.
Yeah.
But what are you doing? What do you do now with all that knowledge, right? Like, are you telling the story? Is there anything more that you're learning about Dalí? Do you feel like you've maxed out on what you can interpret?
No. But we are at a moment right now of pivoting. We're talking about expansion with the building. We're talking about changing up some of the roles that we're in. I hopefully am going to get involved in curating more with some of the shows that we've got. So the big thing I'm doing right now, after many years of teaching docents, is we're trying to turn our class into a digital experience. Trying to create a sort of online hybrid where I don't need to be present for 40 weeks, 40 hours in person. And it's taking, that's really our summer and fall project for me, is to take all that knowledge and all the kind of things we're talking about and turning it into a kind of set format so that whenever I'm moving on, whatever's next, there will still be some continuity there with these stories and the interpretation.
So what did it look like for you with these last 20 plus years of gathering all this information? I mean, did you come from this from looking at the art yourself? You mentioned a couple, biographies or autobiographies and journals. Like, were these things the museum had? Did you have to go find them?
All the above. Yeah. So what's really been pretty wonderful is, when I started out at the museum, I was working at the store and then briefly wound up helping in the curatorial team. But I've been able to grow with the institution, and starting to teach the class forces you to start to look everywhere. Yeah. And it's just, that's never stopped, so there's just always new exhibitions with new writers having new takes on things. And so, we just have a really wonderful library that, and visitors, that come to the museum that have stories to share. And so, and it really helps to work with our public and work with our visitors and work with our docents, see what they're being asked or what they're interested in, and those kind of give you direction for where to go next, what people want to see.
How many pieces are in the do you guys rotate through pieces? Like, how many?
We do.
Because what's on display, I feel like there's a lot more, or some pieces. I won't say a lot, but there's definitely something that's.
I would say that about 3/4 to 4/5 of our oil paintings are on exhibit almost at all times. But we do have, several thousand prints. We have about 200 watercolors that we showed 2 years ago. We have lots of drawings, and those rarely get to be seen. So what we have is mostly the oils. That's what I think a lot of people expect, but we've also started to amplify it with AI and AR and experiences that, like the Dream Tapestry or Dalí Lives or the Dome experience, where we can use technology to amplify some of the stories.
It's really cool. How do you think, art, you mentioned AI, and AI is making art.
Yeah.
What do you think the art world looks like going forward, knowing where tech is and all
Man,
these?
the person that knows that, they rule the world. It's,
What's your
I mean,
interpretation of being an interpreter, of seeing and knowing what you know and putting all the pieces together? If you were to predict where the direction is going, what do you think?
well, I think it gets really complicated to see how artists compete with a world that's digitally being created around them without their control. I think, certainly I know like at Ringling School of Design, they have an entire department focused on AI. And here's artists who are being put out of work, many of them, because they're studying and hoping to get hired by Pixar and, some of these development teams. And a lot of that is now being transferred over to computers. So the big thing is training them so that they can be part of the planning for how things happen, to ask the right questions, to lead how AI is being used. So I don't know. I mean, I'm just really, I use AI all the time, or well, not AI, but I use ChatGPT. We constantly are drawing, using those kind of tools. But at some point, I don't know when they stop being tools and they really start being like pretty self-sufficient. It's pretty amazing and it's a bit it's terrifying.
Yeah, I wonder, what do you think Dali's interpretation of this would be?
Well, back in like 70 or 71, he put together something called objects and devices of the imagination, and it was just this collection of all these kind of like what if objects, and one of them was computerized spectacles for the future, and it was like a pair of glasses you put on that are computers, and it's like he loved that stuff. He loved stereoscopic imagery. He loved holograms. He loved he loved science and physics, and just for him, anything with technology, it didn't matter how simple or complicated it was, he loved it. So he would have been, I think, super excited, even if put him out of a career.
Well, because to the point, it's like you're given a medium, and now how do you use it?
Yeah.
And I would have liked, I can't imagine what his interpretation or how he would find to use these tools that we're using them, right? Because you can say everything that he used to make these paintings were just tools, and that's how he put them together, right?
Yeah. I mean, he when he discovered holography, I think he's one of the very first artists to get involved in it. And of course, he brought in Alice Cooper, and he did like this full weekend long thing with working Alice Cooper and getting all these, getting it shot onto a cylinder. But he also brought in like a tiara that was worth over $1 million, so they had to have armed guards there, and anything that could be done straightforward, he would turn into chaos.
I just had this. Yeah, I mean, he definitely did, right? I mean, I've just seen like exhibits or whatever that he was at, because his presence was just so eccentric and everything, Did he always have the mustache?
Probably late 20s, it starts to show up. By the late 30s, it's there. And by the early 40s, I think it's referencing Velázquez. I think, the great Spanish painter Velázquez, who had a mustache very much like that. When Dalí developed his mustache in America, people didn't think of Velázquez, but in Spain, sort of everyone knew.
That's what it was for. Okay.
Yeah.
I was just saying that's not
so. But yeah, the mustache is everything.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking back to his like early days of like being a painter, so hard, become a famous painter, like almost impossible. What were his connections that led him to fame?
Right place at the right time. When he was a student, he met his close friends Federico Garcia Lorca and Luis Buñuel. They became great figures in Spanish culture. He meets Picasso when he's 22. He has introductions by people like Miro to the members of the surrealist group. They come to like him, and then quickly it's like Dalí's meeting people like Alfred Hitchcock and Walt Disney, and he has audience with the Pope. He has audiences with Freud. It's like it's the thing that makes Dalí really fun, from my perspective. He sort of touches on so much of pop culture that we all love and want to know more about. And he's there. He's in Hollywood. He knows the Marx Brothers. He is in New York. He is part of Warhol's world. It's like he's just constantly overlapping with all these other people that we're fascinated by.
Yeah, it seems like they kept pretty busy for this time that he was in the States.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he wrote. The big challenge was there was not a lot of money in the United States for buying art, and so he starts working with like Vogue magazine, and he starts doing like Bryant Hosiery ads, and he starts doing jewelry, and he just gets very comfortable with really mass mediums that other artists would never have gotten involved in at all. And I think he has fun. I think Dalí is really about keeping himself entertained.
Yeah, what do you think about like that comment you said again of that don't take LSD, take Dalí, Dalí is LSD. Like even in thinking of that, like his mind of exploration of consciousness and how he understood. Because I wish I had him in my pocket right now, but I know from that video that plays at the Dome, there's just some really deep, profound statements that he had an understanding about life in a totally different way as an artist that you don't hear often.
I think you're right. And I think the other aspect is that, unlike almost every other visual artist that I can think of, Dalí was constantly writing. He was as much of an author as he was a painter. He developed a really good style for expressing those ideas, those kind of deep concepts, which makes him eminently quotable. There's so many really good quotes by Dalí, and there's not as many good quotes by other great artists, and a lot of that is simply because he was constantly, involved with writing and trying to express these things. So he had the ability to verbalize some of the things that you intuit, like with the Mark Rothko painting, you intuit certain things. Dalí was able to articulate them in a way that you could point to in an easier way. So I think you're right. I think he gives word and verbalizes some of the kind of deep, profound insights that other artists just take you to, but aren't able to express.
Yeah, and you guys have showcased that well in the Dome. I mean,
that's great to hear.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's unlike any other exhibit you see because it comes to life and it takes you on this story to where you like are with Dalí on his journey through the art, and you can see the imagination that comes to life through his word and through what he creates. And I think that if there's one thing to resemble what I'm hearing from you and just from my limited exposure, and I'm going to say limited compared to you, is he was like a master at just using the imagination muscle.
Yeah.
It does in any medium. It didn't matter.
Yes. Yes. I have a colleague, Kim McQuarrie, who teaches an innovation lab creativity workshop for different groups that can come to the museum and do like an afternoon or a 2-day conference. And one of the key things is this idea that if an artist could express something with one simple solution, Dalí would overcomplicate it with 20 solutions for the same problem. He over conceptualized, he's like an ideating machine. He's constantly coming up with too many ideas, and it's what makes him, I think, absolutely fun and fascinating, and kind of like just always there's an open sesame, a Pandora's box of ideas, because he never turned off.
If you could sum up in a few sentences, what well, it doesn't have to be. What's your love for Dalí? Because obviously you've fallen, and you're one of the few, I would say, in this world that are as close to him as because of just your exposure and time and your depth and being proximity. Why Dalí for you?
It was happenstance, never part of my goal or my early thoughts. I loved surrealism as a kid. That's what I studied when I was in college. Dalí, I saw through the eyes of the art community at that time. He was not, high on my list of people that I admired. And then just as a lark, I started to volunteer and got the job, and very quickly started to realize not only are the stories fascinating, but there's, he is a, what's the right word? He is a reactionary personality. And when you start to understand that and start to embrace it, it's like everywhere where another artist would go with the flow, Dalí chooses to step off and become a reaction against it. And it's a complicated, way to live your life. But once you start to explore that, it's like he is so fascinating, because part of the reason why he became disliked in the 70s is because he is so reactionary to so many things that would have made life much easier, would have made him much more successful in an easier way. But he overcomplicates everything, and I think that's what's really fun. I've always had this fascination with just pop culture, mass culture, high and low mixing together, and he's like the ultimate artist of that. There's a really good reason why Warhol looked at him as kind of father figure, because he knew how to have an entourage. He knew how to be, kind of kingly in the world of culture. And in a way, he knows it's kind of a failure of a thing to be. It's like there's no room for artists like that anymore. But the very fact that he kind of creates this parody of trying to be that is what makes him really fun.
I love it. And obviously the depth now of meeting you and exploring this and being able to hear his mind is just mind blowing. And I know people that are listening are fascinated by it. He's famous for a reason. He's done the work and his dedication and focus. I really like how you said that God kept him focused, because these works took extreme focus and grueling hours, and to show his resilience through his painting, as treacherous times are going on around him in the world and everything else.
Yeah.
And like you said, these massive. How tall was that painting?
So that one's 12 feet.
12 feet tall painting. I mean, like that's, you look at it and you go, how, when you're this close up to it, how do you, and how many times do you have to back up to, it's.
And he was a master of miniatures, and he had an assistant who would help him with these. But I think Dalí is a person of extremes. He was good with intimate pieces. He was good with massive pieces, and the same with his ideas. Some of them were really intricate, and some were just like mind-blowingly broad and general and crazy.
Well, you've taken me on a wild journey. What's a question that I didn't ask you that I should have?
Oh, that's a good question. This has been a really good conversation. I guess the one thing I really didn't touch on that I think is really important is that not only is Dalí a reactionary character, I think he's also provocateur. He's a prankster. And a lot of what makes Dalí really fun for me is that he doesn't take anything too seriously. He has lots of fun, and I think the artist that he most closely identified with at a certain point was Harpo Marx. The Marx brother who plays the harp and doesn't say a word, but is like a source of chaos. And if you think of Dalí as a kind of source of chaos in the art world, if you enjoy that off-brand, he's just absolutely like the layers of the onion constantly peeling back to reveal more and more of this kind of fascinating world that he created.
Well, you definitely did that for us today, Peter, and peeling back the onion. I mean, just looking at the few that we looked at, I've seen things I've never seen before. And now I can't not see the face in this one. Just extremely fascinating. It makes me want to go to the museum tomorrow.
There you go.
If I could.
There you go.
Time-wise. But... yeah, thank you so much, and thank you. What's the next thing? What's happening at the museum? What should we know about? How do we find out more?
Well, like I said, we've got the mural show right now that goes through October, and just really, really fun. I think it's been the most enjoyable show we've done for our community audience. People come in and they're just like looking at trying to find all the connections that artists have woven in. We've got a huge Giacometti show coming up in late November, and that's going to go through April, and he is just like, in many ways, Dalí's polar opposite. You never think of the two of them in the same world. He was about existentialism, where Dalí was about surrealism. But for a moment in time, they were actually kind of collaborators on this project. And the amazing part is that even though they're such different people, their lives almost run parallel in many, many ways. And so this show will be just exploring how, even though they look vastly different from one another, there's these really shared core ideas that keep showing up over and over again. So that'll be fun. And then, of course,
November?
Yeah, that's going to be in November. And then hopefully some sort of expansion. We would really like to be able to grow in the future.
Yeah, well, I think you will. I mean, what you've done with the Dome and these other exhibits that are coming in, and it's just, every time I've been there, there's good amount of people always there. It doesn't matter the time of day.
Yeah, we're really fortunate with that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an incredible location that people just want to visit, with the views of the water and everything. So we're very grateful for you.
Well, thank you, Ryan. This was really fun.
Yes. No, we're very grateful for you. Thank you, Peter, for coming on the show, for dedicating a large portion of your life to this craft, right? I mean, it's been
a long time. I've grown with the institution.
You are a specialist to the highest degree in this, so I'm very grateful to be able to take time to talk to you about my favorite artists. This is like, I feel like I'm like, I don't know, a kid in a candy store, honestly. Yeah, so Salvador Dalí Museum.com. What's the website?
Yeah, Dali.org.
Dali.org.
Yep.
Dali.org. If one thing on the show, we didn't get to talk about St. Pete at all because too many things. But I ask every guest on the show, if it's your birthday, we're in St. Pete, where are you going to eat?
Ooh, that is a really good question. That is a great question. Let's see. Where is it going to be this week?
Your birthday is this week?
No. But I'm just thinking, if it was this week, where would be the place that I'd want to go? There's obviously Urban Stillhouse is great. Pulpa, maybe. You know, right there on Central Avenue might be a great place. I have not gone yet to the Juno and the Peacock. Maybe that would be the place.
That would be a great place. I've been there.
There's a lot of wonderful opportunities. So I don't know. It depends on the hour.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. It sounds like Urban Stillhouse maybe was up on the list for you.
That is high.
Yes, fair enough. Well, Peter, again, thank you so much. Thank you for being here. If you're still with us, like, share, subscribe. Comment below your favorite Dalí piece and your biggest takeaway from this. We're very grateful for you. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye, everyone.